Driving the long hours home from a long weekend of adventure, it's always a little bit melancholy, which is exactly why Bill and I typically try and find a unique and beautiful location, like this place that we found outside Charleston, West Virginia, to break up that day and enjoy on our way home. Bill and I spent the long weekend over President's Day in February of 2024 driving some more of the Kentucky Adventure Tour. The weather had been so cold that weekend that we decided to rent a heated cabin the last night on the trail. And that's how we found ourselves here near Matewan, West Virginia at Hatfields Hideway. The weather had not warmed up, and we discovered one last problem with the cold that morning. While trying to air up, our valve stems kept freezing open or clogging with ice. It took a lot longer that morning to air up, but eventually we found ourselves driving that road away from Hatfields Hideway, headed back towards Ohio. The city of Matewan used to have one of the most severe flooding problems in the U.S., which is why in 1992 the Army Corps of Engineers built this 2,350-foot flood wall around the city. Since that time, the flooding has essentially stopped. The paved roads between Matewan, West Virginia and Charleston, West Virginia proved to be fairly scenic, driving through the Appalachian countryside and hills. This particular area we were driving through is well known for ATV and Jeep trails on the Hatfield and McCoy system of trails. Unfortunately, we didn't have time that day to stop and enjoy some of those tracks. Instead, I was looking on the All Trails app, trying to find a pleasant short hike to break up our drive on the way home. Not only did I find a couple of good options that were literally along the track on the way home, I found one that had several small waterfalls. Welcome to the Alice Knight Memorial Trail through Coonskin Park near Charleston, West Virginia. Coonskin Park is only about 10 minutes outside of downtown Charleston and includes around 1,000 acres of land. This park was created back in 1950, and today it boasts a host of recreational opportunities. Things like biking trails, a pond for fishing and boating, picnic shelters, playgrounds, an Olympic-sized pool, tennis courts, pickleball courts, horseshoe pits, a skate park, a soccer stadium, an amphitheater, a disc golf course, a 3-par golf course, and Rue's favorite kind of activity, hiking trails. Alice Knight was a passionate naturalist, painter, and wildlife photographer who passed away in 2008. This 1.1-mile moderate trail is named in her honor. This trail twists and turns through enchanting woodland as you walk alongside the rocky and narrow Coonskin Fork Ravine. Although several sections of the trail are open and level to walk, you'll also find plenty of sections that are narrow, off-camber, and choked with roots. Looking at the video of this beautiful place, one might think that this is a beautiful, serene, and quiet woodland. But it really isn't always that quiet. Do you recognize that sound? That's the sound of the neighboring West Virginia International Yeager Airport. And that airport doesn't just cast an audio shadow over this particular area. It also casts another kind of shadow. A little over 20 years ago, the Friends of Coonskin organized in order to protest the expansion of the runway at Yeager Airport. That expansion would have destroyed a part of this beautiful park. The local citizens at that time were successful in convincing everybody not to go forward with the expansion. Jumping forward a little more than 20 years to 2023, another expansion was proposed. That new expansion would bury 400 acres of this beautiful park under rubble to expand the runway. 400 acres of hardwood forest would be leveled, along with 15 shelters, 3 playgrounds, sports fields, and over 7.5 miles of hiking trails. The idyllic sandstone ledges, towering trees, and small waterfalls buried forever. When we hiked this trail in February of 2024, this park still remained under the threat of that proposed expansion. The Friends of Coonskin were actively seeking signatures on petitions, speaking at public events, and trying to convince local officials that the expansion simply wasn't a good idea. By the end of March, when I was editing this video, good news came through. At that point, the airport determined that instead of going forward with the expansion project, they would focus on modernization of the terminals instead. Given the track record in this area, it's unlikely that this will be the last threat to this beautiful park. So unfortunately, the Friends of Coonskin are likely to be needed again in the future. But in the meantime, make sure to go out and enjoy this wonderful local park. In the 1940s, the local county commissioners secured property on top of Coonskin Ridge in order to build an airport. It was also suggested by 1944 that Coonskin Hollow, below that airport, would be the perfect place for a community park. By 1945, several hundred acres in this area were set aside by the court to create a memorial park. In 1948, the local community voted a bond issue to improve the park. But by 1949, no improvements were forthcoming. And that's why in 1950, the local community took the matter into their own hands. At that point, the community got together and organized Operation Coonskin, a plan to have the citizens improve the park over a 2-day period. In that time, the people put in over $1 million worth of labor, materials, machines, and superintendents, but not a single dime was spent by the taxpayer. The event even began with a grand parade of machinery through downtown Charleston. Today, the park is one of 4 major parks that is managed by the county.
Aren't you climbing down?
Today, Coonskin Grotto is one of the crowning jewels of this park. You can find this grotto by taking some side trails off of that main loop trail. And you may have to climb through some areas like this to get there, but what I can tell you is that that walk is very worth it. Once you leave the grotto behind, you have 2 choices. You can either go back to the main trail above you, or you can stay on this social trail and walk along those sandstone cliffs. While we walked through here, we ran across some peculiar icicles. I have no idea what made them grow crooked like that. Do you? When we hiked this trail, we pretty much had it to ourselves, though we did come across a few other people. I have no idea what other parks in this particular area of the world look like, but what I can tell you is this particular one is well worth the short hike. Sooner than we expected, we found ourselves hiking back up that last hill to the parking lot. And if you notice that structure way overhead, looks like it ought to be some sort of conveyor or something, but it's not. It actually has to do with the local airport. This structure lines up perfectly with the main runway and lights up the flight path on days when it's hard to see. It's only a few more hours' drive from Charleston, West Virginia and Coonskin Park to our home back in Ohio. And we did take a couple of scenic roads on the way where we found this particular mural. Do you know of any forks that have 5 prongs? I sure don't, but it was an interesting sight nonetheless. Although I'm always a little bit tired at the end of each trip as we finally approach the border to Ohio, I always make time to enjoy the bridges as we drive over. And while part of my brain is back home trying to think of all the responsibilities and the chores and the things that need to get done when I get there, it's always thinking beyond that as well, to our next trip. Where should we go next? Sure, we have plenty of things on our possible list of places to go, but if you have any ideas, we'd be more than happy to hear them. Sadly, our next opportunity to go overlanding won't be until April. That's another whole month away. But don't worry, we're not going to leave you high and dry in the meantime. Instead, we're going to share a local adventure, something like this. Welcome to Mohican State Park. This is one of our favorite local parks to go visit, especially in the winter, and you never know what you're going to see. It's also a perfect spot for us to try out our new pack wraps as we take on the Clear Fork of the Mohican between the Pleasant Hill Dam, going under the covered bridge and the swinging bridge, all the way down to the State Park Campground. Rue may love going on adventures with us, but this time I think maybe she bit off just a little more than she could chew. So I hope you'll come back and join us then. Thanks so much for watching. Now go out and find your own adventure.